Over the years, I've made many different variations of this video. We did the best current NHL player from every country, we did the greatest player of all time from every country, but I realized I've never done this with prospects, so that's exactly what I'm going to do in today's video. Go over the best NHL affiliated prospect from every country in 2022, and I know a lot of people have different opinions on what they define a prospect as, so to qualify for this video, I went with you had to have been drafted by an NHL team, so no Bedards or Michkovs in this video, and also you couldn't have played 9 or more games in a single NHL season, so you still have to be a Calder eligible prospect. So with that all out of the way, let's get things started with some of the countries that don't really have many prospects to choose from. First, we'll go with Denmark, and I definitely have to go with goaltender Mads Søgaard, prospect for the Ottawa Senators. He was a second-round pick by the Sens in 2019, a massive goaltender. He's 6'7" without skates, has already played a couple of games at the NHL level, has his first career win under his belt. He's put up solid numbers in his AHL career so far as well. Really intriguing prospect. Next up we have England. Only one player to choose from here, Liam Kirk, a 7th round draft pick by the Arizona Coyotes in 2018. When Kirk was selected, he became just the 3rd NHL draft pick in history that was born in England. Is there anything there in terms of him developing into a full-time NHLer at this point? It's unlikely, but he's definitely a guy you want to root for. Moving on now to Ukraine. Only one player to choose from here, and that is Artur Cholach, defenseman selected 190th overall by Vegas in the 2021 draft. When Vegas took Cholach in the 6th round, he became the first Ukraine-born NHL draft pick in well over a decade. Next up we have Switzerland. Easily has to be defenseman Leon Bichel. He was selected 18th overall by the Dallas Stars in the most recent draft, the highest Swiss-born draft pick since Nico Hischier went 1st overall in 2017. He's playing over in the Swedish Junior League this season. It'll be interesting to see what kind of year he has over there, but if you're a Stars fan, definitely a prospect you want to keep an eye on. Moving on to Norway, we have another defenseman here, a 5th round selection by Columbus in 2020. We got Ole Bjorkvik Holm. Spent this past season as a member of the Mississauga Steelheads in the Ontario Hockey League. He also served as captain for Team Norway in the most recent World Junior Championships in the 1A division. As a defenseman, he was actually over a point a game in that tournament with 6 points in 5 games. In my eyes, he's definitely the best prospect from Norway right now. The next country we have is Latvia. Gonna go with Ravis Ansons on this one, a prospect of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was their 5th round pick in the 2020 draft. He's coming off of a very big year in the Q where he finished with 60 points in 56 games, split between Baie-Comeau and St. John, and he's another player that had a really good showing in the 1A division of the most recent World Junior Championships, had 9 points in 5 games in that tournament. Moving on now to Kazakhstan, really only one option here, and that is Andrei Byalsky, prospect of the Colorado Avalanche. He was a 3rd round pick by them in 2021. At the time he was selected, he became the first Kazakhstan-born player to be drafted since 2011. Going to be playing for the University of Vermont this upcoming season, so we'll see how his collegiate career goes. Maybe he develops into something for the Avalanche one day. Moving on now to Belarus, gotta go with Danila Klimovich on this one, a 2nd round pick by the Canucks, 41st overall in 2021. That's the highest a prospect born in Belarus has been drafted since Andrei Kostitsyn was selected 10th overall by the Habs in 2003. Klimovich spent the entirety of this past season playing in the AHL for the Abbotsford Canucks, put up decent numbers for a teenager. I'm sure he's going to get a much bigger role this upcoming season. Moving on now to Austria, and here's where we're going to start to get into some household names. I'll give an honorable mention to Marco Kasper, the Red Wings lottery pick from the most recent draft, but the best prospect right now from Austria easily has to be Marco Rossi. He was the 9th overall pick by the Minnesota Wild in the 2020 draft, has an unbelievable amount of offensive upside, just had a really strong season in the American Hockey League where his 53 points was actually tied for the team lead on the Iowa Wild. The expectation from basically everybody is that he's going to make the Wild this upcoming season and probably play a pretty significant role on the team. I'm really intrigued to see what kind of rookie season he has. Next up we have Czechia. This is a really easy one. Has to be defenseman David Juracek, who was selected 6th overall by the Blue Jackets in the most recent draft. Big athletic defenseman, has an absolute bomb of a shot from the point, has all the tools in the world to be a fantastic 2-way top 4 defenseman, and he's a guy that I don't think we're going to have to wait too long to see in the NHL. Speaking of players we probably won't have to wait too long to see play in the NHL, Slovakia easily has to be Juraj Slafkovsky, the 1st overall pick from the most recent draft. Definitely have to give an honorable mention to Simon Nemec as well, the 2nd overall pick from that draft, but I feel like we got to go with Slafkovsky here. The first Slovakian-born 1st overall pick in NHL history, really shot up the draft rankings in the Olympics when he was a goal per game through 7 games with Slovakia in that tournament. That's, I feel like, really when people started to consider the fact that maybe he goes 1st overall instead of Shane Wright, and obviously that's what happened. Slafkovsky is going to be an absolute beast. I fully expect him to be on the Canadiens opening night roster this year. Having Slafkovsky on the left wing and then Caulfield on the right, that's going to be a pretty lethal goal scoring duo for a very, very long time. Continuing on now, next up we have Russia. I'm going to go with Pavel Mintyukov, the 10th overall selection from the 2022 draft by the Anaheim Ducks. This is one where you can really go a lot of different ways with it. I feel like there's going to be a lot of comments asking, what about Yaroslav Askarov? I'm honestly not that high on Askarov. I feel like he's still a very raw prospect. For a goaltender, he has a really hectic, all over the place style, so that's why I went with Mintyukov here. A very, very high upside offensive defenseman, actually led the Saginaw Spirit in points this past season with 62 in 67 games, so he's my pick as the best NHL affiliated Russian prospect at the moment, but as soon as Matvey Michkov is drafted in the upcoming draft, he's definitely going to take over the spot. Germany, it came down to two players for me, JJ Peterka, prospect for the Buffalo Sabres, and Lukas Reichel, prospect for the Chicago Blackhawks. I decided to go with Lukas Reichel, 17th overall selection by the Hawks in 2020. He's coming off of a fantastic season in the AHL, finished over a point per game with 57 in 56. Honestly, I feel like he's not a bad bet as a Calder Trophy dark horse this upcoming season. I think he's definitely primed for a top 6 role on the Hawks when you consider how they kind of gutted their roster this offseason. Maybe he finds himself on a line with Patrick Kane, they find some chemistry. I really feel like Lukas Reichel is in for a big year, definitely a great prospect, so he's my pick for Germany. Next up we have Finland, a lot of really good candidates here. I'll give honorable mentions to Topi Niemela, Brad Lambert, but for my pick, I actually decided to go with Aatu Raty, a second round pick by the New York Islanders in the 2021 NHL draft, a guy who about a year before that 2021 draft was fully expected to be like a top 10 pick, fell down the rankings a little bit because he didn't have a great draft year in the Liga, so the Islanders ended up getting him in the second round, and I feel like that's going to wind up looking like a steal one day. You can make the case that it already does look like a steal. His draft plus 1 year was great, 40 points in 41 games in the Liga, a guy who I think is going to be pushing for a roster spot on the Islanders this season. If he has a good training camp, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that he actually makes the team. Moving on now, we have Sweden. For me, this was one of the toughest decisions. I decided to go with defenseman Simon Edvinsson, the Red Wings' 6th overall pick from 2021, but definitely have to give big honorable mentions to William Eklund, who I almost went with for this spot, and also goaltender Jesper Wallstedt. Also going to mention Alexander Holtz. Sweden has a ton of fantastic prospects. I'm really excited about Simon Edvinsson though, just had a really strong season in the SHL, wasn't all that far off from being a half point per game defenseman. If you've seen Edvinsson play, you'd know the dude is absolutely massive, incredibly lanky with long reach. For his size, he also has a nice set of hands and good skating ability. He has all the tools to be an elite two-way defenseman at the NHL level, and considering Detroit is really weak on the left side, I think there's a real good chance we see him get into a good amount of NHL games this season. Next up we have Canada. My pick is Mason McTavish, the Anaheim Ducks' 3rd overall pick from the 2021 draft. When it comes to countries like Canada and like the United States, who we'll finish off with next, I feel like it's almost kind of pointless to give out honorable mentions because there's just so many, but I will mention the other players I consider for the spot for Canada: Kent Johnson, Owen Power, and Shane Wright. I'm a huge fan of Mason McTavish though. I think he was incredibly impressive at every single level he played at this past season. The NHL, which is where he started his season, I thought he looked good in the 9 games he played for the Ducks. I don't think anybody would have been surprised if they decided to keep him around for the whole season. Produced in his very short stint in the American Hockey League, put up video game like numbers in the OHL, especially in the playoffs. The dude had 16 goals in 19 games, and then obviously in the World Juniors, in my opinion, he was far and away the best player in the entire tournament. The Ducks have a future star here in Mason McTavish. He's going to be a beast and is easily one of the Calder Trophy favorites heading into this season. And now finally, finishing out the video with the United States, my pick is Matty Beniers, but we'll also give some honorable mentions to Logan Cooley, Luke Hughes, Matthew Nyes, some other players I considered for this spot. Decided to go with Matty Beniers though. I feel like you can make the case that he's the best prospect in hockey right now, or best NHL affiliated prospect. He's definitely in that conversation. Led the University of Michigan in points this past season with 43 in 37 games. Also had a stint with Seattle in the NHL to finish out the season where he was basically a point a game through 10 games. Already has a very well-rounded two-way game as well, especially for being such a young centerman. Beniers is really the whole package. I think Seattle has a guy here who eventually is going to be a top 20 centerman in the league year in and year out. So that is going to do it for today's video. That was my take on the best NHL affiliated prospect from every country right now. As always, I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say, so if you disagreed with any of my picks, be sure to let me know who you would go with down below in the comments. And while you're down there, if you could, please be sure to drop a like on this video. I'm really happy with how this one turned out, so definitely let me know if you want to see more list videos like this. and most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want to see more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.